So that we're going to go over some of the intricacies of importing to Excel. If you have a Mac or a Windows machine, there's some very different importing options, but if you're on a Windows machine, you can turn on what are called it's called the legacy import wizard, which is much more like what you have in a Mac. And so for teaching purposes, we're going to use that legacy wizard so that everyone is seeing the same thing. However, this video is going to show you both that legacy wizard and the new, it's called Get and Transform in a Windows Excel. What I have here is a Windows Excel. The legacy import wizard looks a lot like the Mac version, so you should be able to follow along with that. All right, so if you're on a Windows machine, you're going to want to turn on the legacy wizards. To do that, go open up Excel and go to the File menu and go in the green bar on the left, go all the way down to Options in the lower left, and it'll bring up this box. Click on Data, which is the third thing down on the left. And then at the bottom it says Show Legacy Data Import Wizards. There are a bunch of different ones for bringing in different kinds of files. We're only going to need the From Text Legacy. So at least turn that one on and say OK. So now we can let's do a little importing here. So go to File and choose Blank Workbook. So you should have a blank workbook here. And if you have a Mac, this should work fairly similar. Under the Data menu, you should see a Importing or Get and Transform or Get Data, something along those lines. The Windows version, it's in the upper left corner, and the whole area is called Get and Transform Data. If you pull down on Get Data, you'll see the different options for bringing in data from different sources. And one of the options in there should be the legacy wizard that we just connected. So let's choose Legacy From Text. If you're on a Mac, there should be just a Import Data button or something along those lines. And the first thing you'll do is go navigate and find the data you want to import. I'm going to bring in just a sample data set. And whether you're on Windows or a Mac, you should get something like this, the Text Import Wizard. The first step on here is going to ask you the file type that describes your data. Is it delimited or is it fixed width? Most of the time we're dealing with delimited, like it's separated by a comma. That's what a CSV file is. And then you've got the option of Start Import at row 1, wherever your data starts, and then My Data has headers. If your file has headers, you want to make sure that's checked. And then say Next. So then it's going to ask, well, how is it delimited? Is it a tab, a comma, space, something else? So I'm going to change this from tab to comma. And then you'll see the preview sample down at the bottom is breaking up the data in the way we want. And then in the middle of the screen, you'll see text qualifier. Sometimes you'll get data that has double quotes around some of the values. And this happens if, let's say, one of the columns is an address, and they have, the 154 Main Street, comma, St. Paul, comma, Minnesota, all in that one cell, but it's a comma delimited text file. They might put those text qualifiers around it to tell a program like Excel or any other program really that this stuff all goes together and that those commas that are in that address are not the delimiters. So if you see, if you're bringing in data and you see text quotes in this sample here, then you want to make sure that this text qualifier is turned on. And it doesn't hurt to turn it on, even if your file doesn't have text qualifiers like this one doesn't. You can turn that on regardless. Then say next, and here's where you need to get picky and you need to understand your data, and maybe you need your record layout. Um, all of the fields will be set to general. And what that means is if Excel only finds numbers in that column, it will treat it as a number. If it sees any form of text, these dashes, letters, like here, the letter M, anything like that, it will treat it as text. But there are times where you don't want it to treat it as numbers. And the most common one is a zip code. If we treat a zip code as numbers, then the zip codes in New Jersey that begin with 0 will lose their leading 0. So you don't want that. The rule of thumb is that anytime you have a code, any kind of an ID number or a code that you're not going to do math on, you want to treat it as a text. And we have several of those in this data set. There's this column called district number, and you can see the leading zeros there. So I'm going to click on district number and then go up and click on text up here so that it changes to text. Same with school number. Same, and then K through 12 enrollment, that's something we would want to do math on. District type is another code. I'm going to set that to text. School classification is a code. I'll set that to text. And it's going to, this poverty category, it's going to treat that as text normally just because there's words in there. So, basically you just want to go through and make sure all the columns are being treated the way you want them to be treated. The most problematic are those codes or date columns. So be cautious of those. And once you're sure that you're happy with all of these things in here, then you can say finish. Now, keep in mind, this is not a formatting thing. So for example, we have some percentages in here that are displayed as decimals. Once we get it into Excel, then we can make that appear as a whole number with a percent sign. That's a formatting thing. That's not a storage thing. This is how the number is being stored and what Excel will allow it to do. So that's what you want to keep in mind. Say finish, and it's going to ask you where you want to put this existing workbook starting at A1, worksheet starting at A1. Say OK, and it's going to bring it in. There you go. So now I'm going to start a new workbook and show you the get and transform option with that same data. So I go back to data, get data from file, and then I'm going to choose from text CSV. And this is going to bring up a whole different look, much more modern looking. It's taking a little while. Okay, so it wants me to bring in the file. I'll bring that same one in again. This is taking longer than usual. Okay, so it kind of gives you a preview of the data, and if you're happy with it, you can say load and put it straight in. But usually when you're running an import, you're wanting to make some change. You guys probably know that if you double click on a CSV, it will usually just automatically open in Excel, but you may not want to do that in these situations where you have leading zeros. Here on this preview, you can see that it dropped the leading zeros on district number, school number, and district type. Those were those codes that I converted on the other import. What's happening here is that Excel is looking at this going, oh, these are numbers. It doesn't know that they're codes. So that's where you have to transform the data. So at the bottom, there's a button called Transform Data. And it's going to bring up another fancy little wizard here. It's called the Power Query Editor. Lots more bells and whistles, lot more things to get distracted by. I'm going to give you just the bare minimum of what you need to get through this process. So you can see now, this is kind of like where we were changing the other columns, but instead of the word general up there, it's identifying how it's treating each column right next to the label. So ABC data year, that means it's treating it as text. And if you click on the ABC, it brings down all the different options of what you could do. So I'm going to go over here to district number, and you can see it's treating it as 1, 2, 3 as a number. I want it to be text, so I'm going to go down to the text option, and it's going to say, are you sure you want to do this change, and replace current. What you do is you say replace current, and it's keeping track of all the changes you make in this file. It's a kind of a versioning system. You say replace current, and look, it restored those leading zeros and stored it as text. So we can do that here as well. School number, I'll switch to text, replace current. You'll see over on the right is where it's keeping track of the things that you're doing. Once you're happy with what you're bringing in, I'll change one more here quick. Once you're happy with what you've got, then you go up here to the upper left and choose close and load. And there's a straight up close and load that will put it into whatever file you currently have open. Or you can be more explicit by saying close and load to, which will then allow you to choose this existing worksheet starting at A1 or a new worksheet, just like we saw previously. And what it's going to do is create a table, which is going to be a little different than what we had in the other one. And tables work a little differently than Excel, than just a standard data file like that we imported previously. But once you bring it in here, if you don't want it to be a table, you can go up here, there's a table design menu, choose convert to range, and it will take it out of that table thing. It'll leave the green coloring, but you can do some formatting if you want to. It's just formatting if you want it to, that green to go away or change it to a different color. Tables do have some advantages in Excel. But for a lot of the learning we're going to do this week, we're not going to use the table structure kind of thing too much at all. So I'm working on the assumption that you're going to be getting data files from a government agency that will not come in a table structure. It will come as raw data that you need to work with without this table structure. So that's why we're going to do it that way. So there's the two different importing options if you're on Windows. As I said, that legacy importing wizard is more what you're going to see on a Mac.